God, that's so crazy.
In the family had an event. And I lived right next door to my grandparents. And the family had an event that kind of started things at that date. For me, other personal things came later. But for the family, that was a big deal.
So this was, you said 47?
47.
And 47 was the time of the Roswell crash. 47 was a time there was a lot of UFO activity being observed worldwide. And the speculation is that this had to do with the nuclear bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and all the tests that the United States had done and Russia had done, and that there was a lot of interest in that. Well, actually, Russia hadn't dropped any bombs by that time, right?
Right.
It was after that. But
Right.
that there was interest in our species by extraterrestrials because they let, these crazy assholes are detonating nukes. Like, let's go take a look at them.
Right. Well, you had so-called Foo Fighters during the war, these lights that were following bombers. And the tail gunners were the ones that saw them most often, of course. And that happened through the war. And then, of course, Roswell. But before that was Ken Arnold, right, in about June-ish. And then in July 8th was Roswell.
And there's a direct uptick, though, from the Trinity experiments, right?
I think I gather my feeling simply is that without any kind of other evidence or proof that was a huge stimulus. Yeah.
So this was around that time, and you had heard about this as a part of, family discussions,
Right.
And so that sort of ignited the fire initially.
Yeah, and I started asking my friends, as I say, when I was about 10, have you any reports in your family of anything? And by golly, a couple of my close friends told me things that they had never told me before. So, that wasn't necessarily an exclusive event, is what I'm saying. Other people in Las Vegas had seen things at close proximity as well.
Now, your relationship to this is obviously something that you've carried for so long. It's been an obsession of yours for so long.
Yeah.
It started with this, but what personal experiences, if any, have you had?
Well, when I was probably 7 or 8, I used to have what I chalked up all my life to just being silly dreams. And I had maybe 5 or 6 of these dreams, and I could never make sense of them. And I would be laying in bed on my side, and typical dream, always the same. There would be 3 short somethings in a kind of monk robe, and so I couldn't see any face, couldn't see any appendages. And these 3 whatevers were standing there, and they were not too far from my eye level as far as the heights and so forth.
So these like child size?
Yeah. And so there was nothing I was an avid comic book reader, but there was nothing in the whole genre of comic books that related to that, or movies. And we didn't have television in Las Vegas till 53 or 54. And even after that, it was terrible broadcasting, at first. But so it made no sense to me. And so over my lifetime, I never mentioned it to anybody, including my wife. It's funny how you keep things secret and just kind of for no good reason. Maybe I would be embarrassed to talk about it. But I finally thought, well, maybe it was just dreams. Maybe it was something else. And so that was a first event personally that I had at that time in the subject.
When did you start to connect the idea of these tiny people or human-like things with extraterrestrials?
Well, years later, when I began to start my process as a researcher and as a student in the subject, and began to talk with people who made it their business to be experts in abductions, and the more I got into the field and sat writing out questions for the researcher, for the therapist who would be asking the questions, and I'd be sitting there watching the process. And just over time, I thought, well, maybe there was something more to it, but I'm better off not knowing anything, so I'll just block it off and forget about it.
Yeah, we talked last night about John Mack a little bit, the Harvard.
A great guy.
Yeah, and he did a lot of these sort of hypnotic regression sessions with people where they describe very similar scenarios.
A multitude of different situations. The abduction phenomena was very proliferate in the population, it seemed like. Even we did a survey called the Roper Poll, and we repeated it 3 times so that the margin of error was really reduced to like 1.5%. And abduction researchers came up with the 10 questions, and so we distributed that, and the conclusion was a fairly relatively sizable percentage of the population had some kind of experiences, according to them, according to the researchers, and according to the poll. I am not qualified to speak to the accuracy of whether the questions were that relevant to the conclusions or not, but that's what they said. And and I had in my own research found people that I put them through a regression, not personally, but I found a hypnotherapist that could do that, and I found a number of people just here, there, scattered around, maybe somebody in my own staff, and they would come up with these stories and these events.
One of the criticisms of John Mack and hypnotic regression in general is that the idea that you can put a memory into someone's head, that you could suggest things and you could create false memories. And this was something that I've read in the criticism of his work, that this style of hypnotic regression and bringing up these very specific scenarios to a bunch of different people, you can sort of help create, especially in people that are easily influenced or people that are open to suggestion, you could put these false memories in their head. And so, especially when you're dealing with something as fantastic as a
right.
UFO or
right.
alien abduction or visitation or something like that.
Oh, that's definitely possible. There's also something called screen memory, but dealing with the power of suggestion. That's absolutely true. But my experience was with different hypnotherapists, they went out of their way. In fact, maybe if they did make a suggestion, it was just the opposite. They might say, okay, you're on board this craft. Where's the lighting coming from? Is it coming from the corner or of the room that you're in? Well, there were no corners, and they'd be corrected right away by the person being hypnotized. And so they went just the opposite direction on purpose to make suggestions to maybe coax the person to come that direction, and they wouldn't do it. The person wouldn't do it. Now, screen memory is different. Supposedly, if somebody has a very close encounter with supposedly somebody that's ET, you leave that the memory turns out to be entirely different, and that's put into you consciously, and you recall something entirely different than what actually happened. Maybe you saw two deer on the road, or
right.
something of that sort, or maybe there were owls or whatever. So that's what's purported to be.
What's crazy to me is if you go back to Betty and Barney Hill, if you go to Travis Walton, if you go a lot of these abduction experiences, people that did not know each other, and particularly we're talking about before social media, before any of this stuff.
Right.
They have very similar stories, like similar to a disturbing extent.
Yeah. Well, Betty and Barney Hill was accidental.
Yeah.
I think somebody had Betty or Barney had a sleep problem, and they went to try to get some therapy for a sleeping disorder. I think there was some kind of connection like that, but it didn't have to do with, oh my gosh, we have this recollection. The story evolved through the therapy, and in order to try to fix this other problem, all of a sudden this story starts just to flow out, and so I don't know whether it was Betty first, and then Barney later, and I think Barney resisted going under hypnosis, I believe, and then everything just started pouring out. So
There's a woman named Angela Hill. She's a top UFC fighter, and she's actually the granddaughter of Betty and Barney.
no kidding.
It's crazy. And I didn't know about it until after we did a conversation. I was interviewing her, just talking to her about her fighting career.
Yeah.
And at the end of the conversation, she, like, when we were done wrapping up and about to leave, she's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you." And then she tells me that her grandparents were Betty and Barney Hill. I'm like, what?
That's amazing.
That was her grandfather. Which is
Did you inquire? Did you ask?
Yeah, we
her?
talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it, and she, she didn't have much of a memory of him, but her parents recalled the scenes that he described, and obviously it became this huge national story.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing about it when I was a kid. So
Sure.
I mean, it was in the 1950s, right? And
Yes.
Yeah. And there was no archetype that you would sort of model your memories after. I would wonder, like, if I ever did hypnotic regression today, I would be very skeptical of my own memories, because I've heard so many stories of these spaceship encounters. I've talked to people like Travis Walton. I've talked to people like Bob Lazar. I've talked to these people that have had these experiences with these things. I would think that my memory might be tainted by my expectations. But you can't say that about Betty and Barney Hill. These people, there was no stories like that before then.
No.
This is not some pop culture thing that they were latching onto.
Right.
And even the way they describe these creatures, the similarities between their descriptions and Travis Walton's descriptions, 20 plus years later, it's very eerie.
Right.
Right on the front page of the New York Times in 2017.
Yeah, see, that's a new thing, because if you went to like 24 or 2004 when this all happened, no one was really talking about UFOs in a serious manner. Like, it was still something that would be mocked and ridiculed. But to have it on the front page of the New York Times, and to have this spokesperson for the Pentagon say that they've recovered off-world vehicles, not from this earth, not made on this earth, like, this is a change, right? A really, I mean, even though it doesn't receive that much public attention because it's all happening during a pandemic, and everyone's just, and also the news cycle today is so bizarre. Something gets into the news cycle and then it's gone tomorrow because of a new scandal, or people find out Ellen's mean, or whatever it is. There's always something new that's coming out. And these things, though, it seems to be there's more of them and more of them coming out. And with each news story that comes out, people feel more emboldened to tell their story.
I think personally everything changed in December of 2017 when that page, a front page of the New York Times, revealed that secret ATIP program. And I know personally, because I've gotten ridiculed for decades for the work I do, a lot less so recently. People are suddenly raising an eyebrow going, wow, there's clearly something more to this than just, radar, weather balloons and misidentified aircraft.
Jamie, pull up the video that's in that article. There's an actual YouTube video.
There's two. One's from 94, one's from 2013.
Let's go with the 2013 one. But these videos are very strange. You see this object. What's interesting, too, is that, okay, this is the one that I didn't see, but that this thing, the way it moves and behaves, the one that's from, I guess it was from the 94 one. This is the 2013 one. This is the one from Puerto Rico. So it's just kind of cruising across the sky. It's hard to track here in this black and white. There it is. Does it estimate how fast this thing's supposedly going?
It looked like they were near some sort of like military base or something, and on Aguadilla, which is like the west coast.
What? So weird to see. Like, it's not clear what this thing is.
So one of the things that I think it's really good to establish.
I'm sorry, but go further ahead in this video to see if maybe there's a better version of it, or a better.
I sort of checked. The other one has a little clearer video.
Yeah, there you go. That's much clearer. Like, what is that?
Well, if
like, that's not a bird. Like,
yes,
it's moving through the clouds.
One of the things I wanted to make a distinction of is the technology, the observed technology that these guys are talking about. So you've got objects with no wings no visible means of propulsion, the ability to hover, accelerate from a standstill to out of sight in the blink of an eye, right-angle turns at high speed, and fly rings around our fastest jets. That is the technology that cannot be confused or explained away as something conventional. So anytime you see an object like we're looking at here, if it performs or exhibits that technology, maybe it shoots off at a high rate of speed, does a right-angle turn at high speeds, no wings, no tail, no propulsion, no sonic boom, almost no sound.
And they're trying to get a close-up on this thing so you get a better idea of what the shape is. It's very hard to tell. But these objects, also, one of the weird things is it moves around the same way Commander Fravor described that thing moving around that was hovering over the ocean, that it kind of darts around left and right and left, almost like it's just not connected to whatever our atmosphere is. It's like it's moving in this weird zigzag sort of a way.
This is an infrared image, right? It's not visible. It's not a normal camera.
I don't know what it is. Is that what it looks like to you?
I think it's the same type of camera that as the one from the Nimitz. So you're looking at the heat signature. You're not really looking at the visual picture.
Right.
So that's why it's not you cannot get a clear definition of it.
Well, they need better cameras.
Well,
so as you go further
but
along in the video, it does. They do get a better view of it. There it is. There you go. Like, what the hell is that?
You know, that was one of the more startling moments of producing the film The Phenomenon for me was when I met with Senator Harry Reid, who spearheaded the ATIP program, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program that wound up on the front page of the New York Times. I wasn't quite sure when I met with him where his comfort zone was, and so I was really kind of cautious for the first half an hour of the interview. But then we started to relax and get more comfortable with each other, and I decided to kind of push it a little bit, and I said, hey, Senator, I met with Gordon Cooper, who later became Mercury astronaut, who told me on camera that there was a landing incident that took place at Edwards Air Force Base circa 1957, where they happened to have a camera crew out near the dry lake bed capturing the installation of a new landing facility for F-86 fighter jets. And it was broad daylight, and all of a sudden this disc appears out of nowhere, and the camera crew turned their cameras on it, and they filmed the landing of this flying saucer on the dry lake bed at Edwards Air Force Base. And I'm telling the story to Senator Reid, thinking, I don't know how he's going to react but this is what I have him on camera. And I said that he has the film footage developed. It was good footage. He held it up. He looked at it. It was a disc, blah, blah, blah. And eventually he gets a courier jet from Washington, D.C. that flies in, pick up the footage. Senator Reid goes, and it was never seen or heard from again. And I said, yeah, exactly. And I said, did you guys uncover stuff like that? He goes, oh, yeah, it's all there. We have it. It's all there. And then he goes to change the topic and talk about something else. And I said, well, hold on, Senator. Are you saying that there's evidence that hasn't seen the light of day? And he looked at me, and he kind of pauses, and he picks up his water bottle, and he drinks a sip of water, and that moment seemed like an hour, but it was probably just a second or two. And he puts his water bottle down, and he says, I'm saying that most of the evidence hasn't seen the light of day. So that for me was such a powerful moment, because I'm going, look at who this is coming from. This is the former head of, Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid saying that the vast majority of evidence hasn't seen the light of day. And if the President of the United States can't get access to it, as I found out when I interviewed all the people around President Clinton, who can? Who has the authority to have this stuff released? And that's something that I would love to know, and I've been trying to find out.
So someone does. Someone in
Yes.
some position of government or some intelligence agency, someone in the Pentagon, someone or some group at the highest level of clearance has access to this information and knows about it.
Absolutely. Senator Reid said they uncovered all this stuff during the program, and he said the level of resistance that he got from the intelligence agencies was insane. They did not want this project going forward at the Pentagon, but they pushed and they pushed and they pushed and they got it through. started in 2007. It went all the way up until it ended up on the front page of the New York Times in 2017. And of course, now we know that there's another project. But Jacques, do you know who has the authority to release this stuff?